design, creativity, that's the topic of our next panel. You know, when people talking about any kind of art and creativity, most say that can only be done by humans. You know, you need a brain, you need anything, you know, a soul to be creative. Is that still wrong? Well, you know, AI is about to change that, or it might be able to change, and that will be the topic of the very next panel. And it's a great panel, actually. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kaustav Bhattacharya, Chief of AI of RGA. Yeah, come on, move your body. But there's more to come, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ben Plomion, CMO of GumGum. And we do have Billy Seabrook, Global Chief Creative Officer of IBM iX. Ladies and gentlemen, and now please give a very, very big hand for your host, Mr. James Cooper.
Good morning. If you guys weren't awake before, now you are. AI, wow, what an incredible topic. I've been looking forward to this panel all week. But we've heard a lot about 5G also. And I'd love to start off the panel by just getting your opinion about AI, where it is right now, sort of a state of the union, but also how 5G is going to change it as a not only a marketing form, but an art form and a commerce form. So Billy, can we start with you?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, AI is in an incredible sort of inflection point right now, thanks to 5G, but also just the improvement in expansion in cloud computing and processing power. So the availability of data and the way that the machines can now crunch that data and inform our AI systems is phenomenal. So it's a great inflection point. And I'd just like to sort of start off by just sort of defining how we think of AI too, which I think could help sort of frame the conversation. First of all, at IBM, we think of it as augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence, which I think is key because we really believe in the combination of man and machine and its ability to sort of empower us to do more amazing things. And then we define AI, or augmented intelligence, in the form of 4 characteristics of what the system can do. And it needs to first understand all the data that's out there, actually, and then rationalize it and reason that data so it understands sort of the patterns, and then it needs to learn from it, and then ultimately it needs to take all of that learning and come up with new interaction models and with the user using different sensory models. So if we can define AI that way, thinking about the future will create new opportunities.
Good, and on the design side, we're also seeing the sort of a junction, as you mentioned earlier, where for a very long time, AI has been used to make your job as designers or illustrator more efficient. You've been using AI for cropping and even designing websites. But the interesting part about AI and where it's heading is now AI more and more is used for experimentation. If you think about any artist, and I'm not pretending to be one of them, but I'm sure we got plenty in the audience, most of your work is based on exploratory research and work, and I think a lot of it will be soon automated, if not triggered by AI, and we're going to talk about this later in the presentation.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be fascinating when you look at the implications of what 5G will bring: low latency connections, massively more scalable connected cities of the future, as well as connected buildings. I think that's going to be really pivotal, and the key strengths of artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms is to sift through that vast sea of semi-structured and unstructured data and pick up the patterns that are coming out of it. So when, at RGA, when we're in the middle of setting up our connected spaces labs at the moment, looking at productivity and well-being of workers within corporate spaces, for us, 5G is a real enabler because we can start to really increase the amount of data and intelligence that we can collect on living, breathing, working spaces. So whereas today, we as people, as citizens, as workers, we adapt the way we fit into a building in the future, when we start to understand how people move, how they interact, how they work with building spaces, ultimately we can change the way buildings are designed and built to be more in tune with the way we as people want to work, as opposed to the other way around as it is today.
Great, thank you. So Billy, let's start, bring it back down to the here and now. I know IBM has been doing a ton of experimentation with AI. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the teaching moments that have come out of things like Wimbledon and the World Cup that have sort of applications right now?
Yeah, we see in terms of AI affecting customer experience, we look at it in multiple dimensions, but to simplify it, we think of the benefits to insight gathering, to new interaction models with end users, and automation. So if you can think of it in those three ways, and the benefits that you can bring both to the end customer, but then also the businesses themselves implementing AI. So I think a great example that we did recently is this past Wimbledon tennis tournament, and we applied AI in multiple ways to really improve the overall fan experience and the tournament staff's experience as well. And we did it across four things. First, we used AI for security benefits, so it augmented the human security force that was there on the tournament and gave them augmented information to help sort of prioritize where they focused. So that was hugely helpful for security purposes. We enabled their mobile app with an AI chatbot that we called Fred, who could really improve the customer service experience at the tournament. We used AI to monitor all the social media traffic that was going on, all the conversations that were happening. We'd scrub all that unstructured data, which is impossible to do for one person, and we synthesized that and created insights that then we gave to the editorial team so they could determine which content to send to which population of people and stay really current and fresh, which gave them, empowered that team incredibly to sort of save time and be more responsive. And then fourth, we actually used AI to essentially watch all of the matches happening and dynamically pick out the most, the best shots, the most exciting points, and dynamically create highlight reels instantly. So that process of video editing and searching, essentially watching all the matches and deciding what would make the highlight reel, is a very time-consuming process for their editorial team and their video team. And we basically automated that so it allowed them to think about more creative storytelling. So it really helped them, and obviously it helps the end user because we were able to broadcast out all these timely clips globally within minutes of them taking place. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Ben, design in the AI space, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of hope around how AI can help with design and creativity, but there's also the question of how humans are going to sort of deal with it. And how do you sort of foster a human resilience to make sure that the humanity around creativity and design doesn't get lost by the numbers?
Right. I think a key question that I have in my head is AI a true creative assistant, or is AI a solo creator of art? And it's a difficult question because right now it has been for the most part a creative assistant. We talk about augmented creativity, for example, and I'll give you a couple of examples. At GamGam, our job is to teach machines to see. In other words, we use computer vision to understand the content of images and videos. And we do this mostly for marketers all over the US and also Europe. And we use it to solve particular issues that our clients have. And I'll give you an example. In the UK, we had this company, Vodafone, came to us and asked us during the launch of the iPhone 10 sometime earlier this year, how do we overcome Apple restrictions in terms of what we can do with advertising or not? What I mean by that is when you work with Apple, there's a number of marketing restrictions and how you use the logo and things like that. And the reality is AI helped us come up with a very interesting way of cutting through the clutter, if you want. So instead of us showing an iPhone 10 ad like anyone else has done in the US, for Vodafone we did something very special. We look at all the images of iPhone 10. we use computer vision, which is image recognition, to determine whether this phone was an iPhone 10 or something else. We look at the button of the phone, the screen, et cetera, and then when we identify the image was an iPhone 10, we overlay an ad for Vodafone on behalf of Apple. In other words, without mentioning the word Apple or iPhone 10, we're able to overcome those creative restrictions and show a very powerful ad that drove a lot of performance in the UK. So that's very particular use of AI and how we use computer vision to drive performance on behalf of our clients.
Kostav, we talked a little bit yesterday in our pre-interview about emotional intelligence in the AI space, and that's certainly something that is kind of cool, but also a little creepy. How is emotion coming into AI, and where will it take this?
Yeah, it's a fascinating area. I think when you look at the many different ways emotional AI has been developing over the last 10 years, it started off with recognizing facial expressions, so it could tell whether you're smiling, you're scared, happy, surprised, etc. All the way through to now we've got some very sophisticated algorithms from companies all around the world doing voice intonation recognition. So they can listen to between 5 to 10 seconds of me speaking or anyone speaking up here, and over an elapsed period of time can dynamically figure out your emotional state as you're speaking. So there's a very, very interesting interview on YouTube that you should all look up, which is Steve Jobs being interviewed using a system called Beyond Verbal. And if you watch that video and just look at there's a little picture-in-picture of the interview and Steve Jobs being interviewed, and then there's the algorithm, the screen, it's outputting every 10 seconds Steve Jobs, kind of his introspection, his anxiousness, and the lead up to the launch of the first iPhone in 2007, and then the realization and the release of emotion that he actually made the right decision to go with the phone rather than the tablet first. And the algorithm absolutely nails it, just purely based upon his voice intonation. And so if you now kind of fast forward with all of that today, and you look at the digital assistants that we have in our homes, like Google Home and the Amazon Echo devices and many others out there, right now, they're very sort of analog in a way. You know, they're very sort of black and white experiences. You ask a question, you get an answer, if you're lucky. And it's not really a dialogue. It's just a Q&A session. And you have to know how to speak to these devices in the sort of the dialect or the way it understands. Now, when you start to marry emotional AI with traditional AI, if I can call it that, I think that's where it starts to get really fascinating. My personal thesis is that the majority of people in the world are still skeptical about AI solutions such as digital assistants, purely because, well, maybe not purely because, but a factor is that they don't display human-like emotion. They can't connect to us as people on an emotional level. So when my wife says to Alexa, turn the lights on, and the lights off instead, and she gets, her voice immediately changes, her body language changes, she gets angry at it. If these devices can pick up on these subtle nuances of human emotional interaction, I think their ability to interact with us will be so much more sophisticated and more natural, and therefore making us more, allowing us to warm towards them, as opposed to the very alien way that we have to interact with them right now.
Billy, you've been doing some interesting work, I think, with Toyota and Red Wing, right?
Yeah, Red Wing, yeah.
Yep. So how are you using AI to help brand build? And what are some of the nuances about it?
The Red Wing story is really interesting. Red Wing Shoes is this worker boot shoe company that we did an interesting demand generation campaign with using Watson advertising. And what was interesting about it is that we took our weather data. So IBM acquired the Weather Channel years ago, and we have access to all of the weather data, which happens to be the largest IoT network in the world, if you think about all the weather sensors out there. So it's massive amounts of data. And we correlated or matched that data for the past 3 years to Red Wing Shoes sales by geography. So we started to find correlations between how weather affected people's buying decisions and where they were going. And then we took that and we started to predict what would happen next, which then informed the placement and the targeting of our dynamic ads that went out on Weather Channel and brand safe environments, as well as other sort of out of home targeting construction workers or people that would be looking for boots at particular times based on weather. So it was an incredible use of data. It actually resulted in, I believe, over 40% increase in in-store traffic based on that intelligence of how weather can drive purchase decision. And that just drove more personalized and relevant content, which in effect builds the brand, builds trust of the brand based on just how relevant the content is.
Great. Ben, we have a little interactive quiz for the audience. Basically, this is looking at the difference between art and algorithm, right? And do you want to cue it up?
Yeah, let me see if we can pull up the slide.
Yeah.
Can we pull up Ben's slide, please?
It was just. There it is.
Right, so
I don't think it's up on.
Oh, there it is.
I think it's coming up. I was very interested in how the relationship between AI and art in particular. And what we did here was to put AI to the test. So what we did is we basically hired 5 illustrators and designers all over the world, Brazil, US, and also Spain. And then we also hired a cloud painter. So you may wonder what the hell a cloud painter is. A cloud painter is an AI machine that basically produces art based on algorithm and neural networks from a real artist. And I want to show you the 6 pieces of art that came out of this result. All 6 of them, the 5 artists and the machine, were given the exact same instruction. In other words, the same data sets, which were paintings from American century, 20th century. So the question is, which one is AI, which one is human-made? So 5 of them are human-made, 1 is AI, and I would love to ask the audience, what do you think is what? So just as a quick show of hands, what do you think A is the one that was produced by AI? Couple of hands here. What about B? AI or human-made? A few more hands here. What about C? Interesting. More hands. D? Anyone for D? All right, a few hands here. E? Many more hands. Interesting too. What about F? You guys are completely divided. So the answer is F. Frankly, I failed the test. The reason being is if you look at F in details, it's just not as polished as the rest of the other painting, which is counterintuitive because my assumption when I look at this for the first time was the most sophisticated piece is probably being designed by AI. It's actually the opposite. If you look at how the paint is dropping on the frame. So F is the one produced by AI. The 5 others are being produced by real human beings like you and I.
So with this experiment said, what are some of the important takeaways for you in the design and creative space, given the results of this? I mean, have you any important epiphanies to share?
I think the biggest takeaway is, can AI produce art? And I've been asking that question to the artists involved in that project and the cloud painter, not the machine, but the man behind the machine. And his answer was very clear. Yes, a machine can produce art for another machine. But a machine cannot be producing art for a human being. I asked, why is that? I said, it's very simple. A machine doesn't have the shared experience that you and I have. A machine does not experience death or sadness or joy. And as a result, a machine is unable to communicate those expressions to you the same way a human being can. So at this point of time in our history, it feels like, yes, a machine can replicate and mimic art, but cannot come up with art on itself because it doesn't have this sort of share of beliefs that you and I have.
With that said, Kostov, how far are we away from AI being able to create that shared experience?
I think the point you raise is really important because when you look at what we're trying to do with algorithms, it's like a disembodied thing, whereas we as people, we have senses which are multifaceted. We can hear, we can smell, we can taste, we can experience emotion. We can be affected positively and negatively by music, by a smell that recalls a memory from 2 decades ago. And these are all senses and signals that add to our interpretation of the world. And that right now, from my perspective, is not really possible with artificial intelligence. We are starting to emulate elements of that. So most of you would have seen the Google Duplex demo at I/O this year, the amazing ability for the voice to emulate the way we speak with all the ums and ahs and the ahas and all those kind of things as we talk. But whilst that is amazing in itself and makes it sound very natural, it's still a facsimile. You look at any other interpretation of artificial intelligence today, and its model of the world is very narrow. So the reason why Siri is good at doing what Siri does is because it has that kind of narrow knowledge domain. The reason why a facial recognition system is good at what it does is because it has a narrow domain. We developed. We're about to launch a project with a big drinks manufacturer soon, where we've trained it specifically. So this is quite an interesting creative interpretation. We wanted to empower people in pubs and bars who work behind the bar to be able to pour the perfectly represented pint of this beverage. And we figured,
it's beer, right? We're talking about
it's beer. It's a beer. And we wanted to figure out how could we do this in a creative way, rather than just sort of training them in the conventional sense. So we developed an application that you fire it up on your phone. You take a picture. Imagine this is a pint of beer. You take a picture of it. It analyzes every aspect of the beer, from the size of the head to whether there's a dome on top, to the shape of the glass, the branding, whether it's a clean glass, whether there is any overspill around the glass. It looks at all of that in real time using image recognition technology, and gives you back a score. And for us, it was a way of actually expressing a much more creative approach to solving that problem, as opposed to the conventional method of sending somebody out to train people, et cetera, et cetera. So it'll be interesting to see how that's received once it hits the wild in the weeks to come. But I think, going back to what you were saying, I think creativity and art is so broad that on one side you have literal art that we saw up on the screen. And on the other side, there's the creative expression of the way we go about as people engaging with society that can also be creative. We are indeed always doing that. And now with machines being able to interpret some nuances of human creativity, that human-machine boundary is slowly starting to get dissolved, and will increasingly do so over time.
Billy, are there parts of like the brand marketing ecosystem that are sort of really ripe for an AI application? I know we're talking about like, supply chain and things like that, but like what can AI do right now to help?
Yeah, every aspect of the customer life cycle, if you will, can be influenced and enhanced by AI. So I mentioned the Red Wing Boots example, which is really demand generation advertising. Wimbledon was really content creation and engagement. We've done a lot of work with a variety of different industries on customer service chatbots that are getting much more beyond just call and response type of value, and sort of providing a little bit of brand consistency, I would say, and as far as personality and the language is used, but also taking it one step further into commerce. So there's another example. We worked with Staples, which is a office supply retailer, to basically digitize their easy button, which is a sort of a graphic mnemonic that they had, or graphic asset that they had, brand asset. And we digitized it to become an actual digital assistant that would learn your buying behaviors, your preferences for office supplies, and learn over time to do automated ambient type of commerce. Huge implications there as far as driving more sort of personalization on people's preferences, and taking it one step further to almost predict what you're going to need and make the purchase decisions on your behalf. So along the whole sort of customer journey, from acquisition all the way through to loyalty, I think infusing AI and how we listen to what the customer needs and how we make the content that we push to them much more relevant has great implications for both the end customer as well as the business themselves as being just better at operating.
Ben, so when you were talking to your clients who might not be as sort of up the learning curve as most people maybe on AI, how do you best onboard AI as a function of your marketing and creative?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we do is we sometimes have to re-educate brands and sometimes agencies too on the fact that AI is nothing new to marketing. Particularly if you look at machine learning has been used by marketers for a very long period of time, whether it's dynamic segmentation, programmatic advertising, chatbot marketing, and other things. But the biggest gap today is most of the work that's been done around machine learning is being done on the programmatic side, being able to show you an ad at the right time, be able to optimize an ad based on your behavior and things like this. What hasn't been done as well is the application of AI or computer vision into, let's say, things like dynamic creative optimizations or dynamic content optimization. In other words, because we know so much about you, and I don't want to be, we know so much about your preferences, we know so much about the color that makes you tick or not tick, there is no reason not to be able to personalize a web page every time you go to a new website or a new ad creative in front of you. For example, we did a campaign for L'Oréal Paris a few years ago where we're able to recognize the content of an image on the publisher website and customize the ad based on the image itself. If the image had a picture of a red color, hair color woman of 25 years old, we could customize the ad and match the color of the hair coloring products in this L'Oréal ad based on the image it was showed into. So I think we're just scratching the surface here when it comes to dynamic content personalization, dynamic content optimization, because we know more and more about you, and AI can process all this data and deliver the sort of a interesting creative.
Christoph, and some of the anxiety around AI is that it's going to take jobs away from people and replace humans. You have a really interesting take on that. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, sure. So, you hear this a lot in the press, the doom, the impending doom of AI upon us all. I have a very different interpretation. When you look at some of the really great examples, and especially in the area of healthcare at the moment, I think it's fantastic. So in the UK, recently, DeepMind has been helping the healthcare system over there to interpret eye disease, macular degeneration, by scanning millions of examples of eye disease on your retina and training a system to be able to pick it up. I think they have something like 95 to 98% accuracy with speeds that are way beyond human capability. Now, to me, that's fantastic. It's not going to be putting people out of a job. If you think about it, in most countries where there's a national health system, the system is under heavy pressure for those doctors to get as many people through the system as possible. An 8-minute or a 10-minute consultation maximum. You don't really get time to connect with your physician. It's kind of in and out. So with these kind of systems, I think, A, it'll release people from doing the monkey work, the menial work, and help them move up further up the value chain and have more of a patient-doctor relationship that's much deeper and building up that's a critical, crucial sort of emotional bond between the two. And secondly, it'll also enable people in the medical profession to really spend more time on research rather than just interpreting. They can continue to learn themselves and grow. So that's just one manifestation example of the way I think AI will augment people's roles in the world.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Just around the question of, is it going to displace jobs in the shift? I agree that it's actually going to introduce new jobs, theoretically, especially around ethics and how machines are starting to, and AI starts to, deliver content dynamically. We have to create that role. It's just, I wanted to highlight that we just did a recent study at IBM around asking customer experience executives, over 1,000 of them, and over 900 customer experience practitioners, meaning the people actually implementing AI, what their perceptions were on sort of the state of AI, how it was going to affect their jobs, and if they had to change their ways of practicing. And we recognized in the data, we compared the data, and there was a massive disconnect between the two, where the level of confidence in their ability to adopt AI, their capabilities, their own skills, their access to data, and even beyond, like their perception of what they've already done and what they're planning to do, it was like a massive disconnect. So I won't go into the details here, but I recommend that you all download that study because it has implications on how organizations should work differently, hierarchically, between the executives and the practitioners.
And that was perfectly played out.
Yeah.
Guys, we're obviously out of time. Please thank Costa, Ben, and Billy. It was really into the conversation.
Sorry, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big hand for Costa Bhattacharya, Ben Plomion, Billy Seabrook, and James Cooper. Thank you very much.